G'day, Australia. Welcome to the ISS News, the daily snapshot of news you actually need to see. I'm Anthony Meixner, and with me, as always, is Adrian Sutter. How you going, mate?
Good to go.
Hey, we got some ripper headlines this morning. Doom scrolling. Are you doing it? Are you addicted to it? Body batteries. Could this be the prequel to The Matrix? And China buys Afghanistan. Let's get into it. Doom scrolling.
All right. Doom scrolling, mate. I have not read this one, so this one's going to have to stay with you. What do we got?
All right, so researchers at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis have identified specific areas in the brain that become active when individuals are faced with choices to either learn a bad experience is about to happen or hide from it. So, for instance, we know that everybody likes to find out if they've got a winning lottery ticket or if their horses run in. This one is that, do you want to bury your head in the sand from bad news, or are you addicted to have to know the results regardless of whether it's good or bad? Now, the results were published in Neuron in June 11, and the why of this whole thing is that this is going to allow us to uncover some of the underlying psychiatric conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, and not to mention, it might give us some new techniques to help us cope with the deluge of information that we all experience in the modern world with our phones and the various social media platforms. So people who equip and deal with this information, an associate professor of neuroscience and neurology, biomedical engineering, that is a big title. People are constantly checking for news, and some of that checking is totally unhelpful. So this is the behaviors that they're doing. It's crazy. I don't do it. I think I'm a head barrier. I don't know. What do you reckon, Adrian?
I do both. Or definitely, I think there's a bit of FOMO in there. Definitely a bit of anxiety about making sure that we're on top of things, ahead of things, like being, like I said before the show, mate, like wanting to be the first to release concepts or the first to know things. I think I've seen that become very prominent in the last 5, 6, 7 years on social media. Everybody wants to be the first one to tell their mates that they know some shit. And most of the time, we kind of pop off before we've actually done the research. And that's why we're just scanning through, looking for headlines, looking for juicy bits. I don't know about the people searching for negativity. I definitely know that if I do spend too much time on social media scrolling, I feel like shit after it. So that may be the negative absorption subconsciously. But yeah, mate, it seems like there's not a lot of positives to spending a lot of time scrolling through your phone.
No, so in this particular experiment, they used monkeys. It was a positive, I suppose, and they shot airs of, like, they had two symbols. They had the symbol that would give them a little squirt of juice, apple juice, and there was a symbol that would maybe shoot them in the face with a jet of air. And so both monkeys are like absolutely cool when it come to the symbol that give them the positive result. But when it was coming to the symbol that would make them possibly have a bad experience or get bad news, they were completely different. So one monkey was like, fuck it, I'm going to hit the button. And the other monkey was like, nah, I'm not doing it, bro. So this sort of stuff, I mean, it's a little bit more complex than how I've paraphrased in that. But yeah, it's interesting to see how we're using this technology in psychiatric
good to go
field.
Righto, we're going to have to keep tracking that going forward. But for the next story,
body batteries and the Matrix prequel.
That was my one. Good. All right. So, a research team in Tel Aviv have discovered a new nanotech that can be used for a bunch of reasons inside your body, and it's powered by as little as a human heartbeat. Now, this came out yesterday, 6th of July. Things like pacemakers, they're no longer going to need batteries for them because they can use, like I said, your heartbeat to charge your pacemaker. Now, I don't completely understand that, mate, how we can get a pacemaker charged by a human heart. That sounds bloody dangerous, but it sounds like the researchers in Tel Aviv are far smarter than we are. Now, this being step one, starting to use the human body as a bio battery, scientific implications or use cases for stuff like this seem to be infinite, but my brain goes straight to the Matrix, mate. What do you reckon? Is this the start of Terminator / the Matrix, machines taking over and turning humans into a power source?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. The way that it works, we know that it does. So sitting in a vat of liquid and your heartbeat or your intestinal tract, the movement of your intestinal tract, your jaw clenching, these are the things that create this piezoelectricity, and that can be harnessed. We know it's very small now, but we talk about living in a simulation, and we talk about, people are stuck on their phones in VR. Mate, it's looking awfully Matrix to me. So I think I always go to the negative aspect of everything, especially with human beings. If there's a way to split an atom to solve so there's no more shortage of electricity in the world, or there's the other way to split an atom, and that is to kill everything, we always pick the other way. So
I don't know if we pick it. I think the human brain initially wants to do good, and then we get into it and we're like, hey, it's kind of cheaper and more efficient if we just use this technology for a negative reason. So let's use it to blow up countries or to take over the world, mate. As anyone who knows me knows, I'm a firm believer that this is all a simulation. If I'm going to get faithful behind any kind of philosophy, that's the one that I buy into the most. The question I always get asked when I try and unpack how this could potentially be a simulation, people go why would anyone create that? And this is one of the reasons. You could be data farming, or you could be turning humans into batteries. So when I see stuff like this happening, mate, it is a little bit scary. I think there's going to be some massive positives in the next few decades, but then what happens after that will be the big one. Do we fuck the whole planet? Most likely. Keeping it positive, though. What's the next story?
Righto. It's not really positive, to be honest. Story 3. So China buys Afghanistan. And you know what? It is a sensationalized headline, but it is a lot of truth in it. Okay, so this is between Beijing and the Taliban, to be honest. Where it's in Afghanistan, we know the troops have withdrawn from Afghan. We know that the Yanks are going to be out September 11. That's what Granddad Biden's said. Troops are out in September 11. So what's happening is, as the troops are withdrawing, it's not so much a fight per se. It's just that when the Taliban just wait. As soon as the Yanks gone, the Taliban move in. And so Beijing, as part of so have a look at it. We've got some links in there. This is pretty cool. We know that it's called the China Belt and Road Initiative, and that was a derivative of their old One Belt, One Road. Or if you think about back in the old days, the old trade routes, like the Silk Road. So this is an initiative for China to economically start to dominate the world space. It's a new type of warfare that we're seeing. We used to look at World War I and II, open conflict. So, guys with bayonets jumping out of the trenches. Now we're moved into competition. And this is just a nice way of saying we're at war, but we're doing it economically, and we're doing it by buying the world effectively and creating these economic corridors. So this is going to happen. And this is, if you have a look, this is what happened in Melbourne when Dictator Dan sold all that roading and infrastructure to China. And then we had to get in, and Maurice Payne or whoever it was jumped in. I think maybe it was Granddad Dutton. God Emperor Dutton jumped in and said, no, we're not doing it anymore. We're going to can the whole idea. But if you think about this, the Australia, Japan, and America have got their opposing initiative called the Blue Dot Network. And if you click on the links that we'll put in the comments, you'll be able to see where these two initiatives are going to come into conflict regionally around Australia. And so my point is, where do you think the most heated conflict or competition is going to happen? And where do you reckon that's going to go?
All right, well, I definitely don't have an answer to that, but I think there's two parts to this. One, I mean, the reason we started this kind of 15-minute-a-day news piece is so we can unpack a few of the stories and provide links to people so they can start doing their own research instead of just looking at clickbait kind of garbage that major media outlets push forward on social media. The story about China is going to be all across mainstream media for years to come, because I don't think this is, I mean, we're in the Middle East for 20 years and that's still turned into a shit fight. we left, America left, and now there's a vacuum, and it's going to go back to how it was 20 years ago before we even got there. Now, any kind of conflict with China is going to take place over decades, right? And like you said, it's more than likely, it's looking like it's not going to be a boots on the ground kind of conflict. It's going to be economic and seeing who can take over what. My point in this is every person I've ever met who's lived in China raves about how peaceful, happy and loving the Chinese people are. Yet all the news stories we get on China are China's the big red enemy, beware, it's propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. So for this story, rather than looking at like giving a shit about trade routes and government-based like economic strategy, mate, I know we should all be across it slightly, but I don't really care because the people in Canberra are going to do what they're going to want to do, and politics is going to be politics, and the world's going to be a shit fight for years to come. What I would urge our listeners to do is go, if this is going to be a major story and something that you're actually interested in talking about over beers or around the campfire, do some research into both sides of the story before believing any of the propaganda that comes out. Because there was nothing but propaganda that got us into the Middle East. And this next war that's kicking off with China, it reeks of propaganda and fake news based off this. If you join the dots and go, there was a US election mixed with COVID, mixed with now an impending war against China, that sounds like some seriously masterful puppetry at the highest level, using mainstream media to push out the narrative they want to push out. So rather than, I'm probably waffling, mate, but rather than amplify the story that you've just given us, I just urge people to go do some research into both sides of the story before you pick a side and start hating China or hating Australians, like half of you probably will, when you read the propaganda that comes out on this new potential war for the Belt. What are we calling it? The Belt and Road Project versus the G7 or Blue Dot? Blue Dot.
Blue Dot. So the good thing is, I mean, the thing to think about in this is that China just went through it a different way. So the Taliban have now, it's like the IRA in Ireland, right? So the IRA, they kind of fucked up a little bit, and they blew up a whole bunch of kids, and then they got the general public went, you know what, we fucking had enough. So it forced them to go mainstream and become an actual political party as opposed to stay terrorist. Or that's what you do. You conduct terrorism activities until the government's forced to legitimize you. So China's gone, hey, we're going to put this big Belt and Road initiative. We're going to go from Pakistan, build a big road from Beijing to Pakistan. But we need protection for all of our labor guys. We're going to invest $60 billion. So they've just said to the Taliban, hey, you want to be the government? We're going to give you the money. You look after us. What do you reckon? They're like, yeah, fuck it. No worries. But have a look at the article and tell us what you think. This is a really interesting one, and it will have some relevance to our lives, especially in our region when we talk about South China Sea and Taiwan.
Right. Is there any? Do we want any feedback from that? Well, I mean, it's a pretty open topic. It's going to be fairly relevant to a lot of the people that listen to this show. So if you do any opinions, any feedback at all on the Western or the Allied forces exit from Afghan, knowing now that all the spots that we fought and our mates died for have now most likely been retaken by the Taliban, and obviously comment on your opinions on China's involvement in the Middle East and what it means for Australia.
Righto, guys, that was the news. There was some of the headlines from content that you need to know. Get engaged. Come with us on this journey. Let us know what you think about the stories. Be happy to have your input. As always, see you tomorrow for another episode.